Alhamdulillah, we completed almost to the end of Surah Al-Baqarah today. We read up until the 1/4 of the third juz. So yesterday, Alhamdulillah, we finished the first juz and we talked about the significance of gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the effects of what happens when a person is ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, مَا يَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابِكُمْ إِن شَكَرْتُمْ وَآمَنْتُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ شَاكِرًا عَلِيمًا. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want with you? What will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do to you if you're grateful to Him? Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want to punish you? What will Allah get out of punishing you if you're grateful to Him and you believe in Him? And that shows that gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leads to belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ شَاكِرًا عَلِيمًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever appreciative and all-knowing. So now, in the beginning of the second juz, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is there's a transition. The first half of the surah, it addressed the Bani Israel. Now the second half of the surah is going to be speaking to the Bani Ismail, meaning those who came from Ibrahim alayhi salam to Ismail alayhi salam. The Bani Israel, they're Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam. And Yaqub alayhi salam is the other name of Israel, right? So that's Bani Israel. Now to shift to Bani Ismail, the discussion of the Qibla comes in the middle. Because the Qibla, first the Muslims, they used to face the Qibla of the Bani Israel, then it was switched to the Kaaba. So that discussion comes in there. There's one important ayah that comes. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. That all believers seek assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through sabr and through salah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are steadfast. Now in this ayah we learn something else. A lot of times we think that patience just has to do with a difficulty that afflicts us, and at that time we're calm. But patience, sabr, is something that's much more broad in our deen. Patience is something that's much more broad in our deen. And it encompasses every moment of our life. Because there's three levels of sabr, or three aspects to sabr. There's sabr ala ta'ah. There's being steadfast and consistent and having patience in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, we have the tawfiq to come here, to pray salah, right? It's difficult to push yourself to come every single day. That requires sabr as well. That requires steadfastness as well. Then there's sabr anil ma'siyah, patience in abstaining from sin. And last is sabr inda al-musibah, that when something difficult happens for a person to maintain their composure at that time. So if you look at every single thing that happens in our life, there's an aspect of sabr to it. And if a person wants to practice shukr, they need to have sabr. They need to be consistent on showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala their gratitude. So this discussion goes on, then we come to لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. This ayah is ayah number 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Ayah 177. And this ayah is known as Abwabul Bir, the doors to righteousness. You see, the Bani Israel, they were rejecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first half of the surah was an invitation to non-Muslims. Therefore, most of the topics, it had to do with Tawheed, it had to do with Risala, it had to do with proper beliefs. But when a person believes already, now the next thing is, what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to do? To put it another way, non-Muslims, the thing that they're mukallaf of, they're not at fault for not praying namaz, for not praying salah. They're at fault for not having iman. Their mukallaf, their responsibility is to become Muslim. But for us, if somebody already has iman, then that person is at fault if na'udhu billah, if they don't pray salah, right? Now once a person has accepted La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that there's no God but Allah, therefore I'll obey everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, and I'll do things the way Allah wants. Muhammadur Rasulullah, there's no messenger, or the messenger of Allah is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, therefore I will follow him in every aspect. So once we accept Islam, it demands that we do things that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this ayah is called the doors to goodness because it gives, in general, it gives you many good deeds that it gives you many good deeds, and after that the rest of the surah it expands on them. So let me ask you all a question. What are the 5 branches of Deen? So not the 5 pillars of Islam, but the 5 pillars of Deen or branches of Deen. What are they? Somebody tell me. 5 general topics that our Deen will encompass. Same thing, got it, right? And so the first thing is Iman, right? Belief, Iman. Then there's, so Iman, Aqaid, all of that is one thing. Then there's Ibadat, acts of worship. Then there's Mu'amalat, dealings and transactions. And then there's Mu'asharat. Mu'asharat is dealing with one another, right? And then there's Akhlaqiyat. There's things dealing, or tazkiyah, things dealing with our purification. And if you look at all of these 5 things, initially, all of the scholars of Islam, they were scholars of all of these things. It was all just considered deen. Later on what happened is when they were divided into different things. So the first thing, Imaniyat, they became the science of Aqidah. The middle 3, Ibadat, Mu'amalat, Mu'asharat, they became the science of fiqh. And the last one, Akhlaq, it became the science of Tazkiyah. But all of these together, they make up Deen. And in this ayah, you find the core of each of these. Look, Allah says, لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. It's not righteousness that you turn your face to east or west. وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. Righteous is the one who believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment. وَالْمَلَائِكَ وَالْكِتَابِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ. Over here we have our Iman. Then وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب. Giving wealth despite loving it. Over here, that's purifying yourself too. Because you love it but you're giving it up. But who are you giving it to? Your close relatives, orphans, poor people, travelers. Those who ask, this is also from mu'asharat, right? وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ. Praying salah, giving zakah. Over here, this is our ibadah. وَالْمُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِهِمْ إِذَا عَاهَدُوا. Fulfilling promises when they're made. This is our mu'amalah. وَالصَّابِرِينَ فِي الْبَأْسَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ. And patience, steadfastness at the time of difficulty, at the time of pain, at the time of battle. This is our tazkiyah. This is our purification. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُتَّقُونَ. So the rest of the surah, it discusses all sorts of different things that have to do with fiqh. So for example, there's the law of equal retribution, the laws of fasting, the laws of Hajj. And when it comes to Hajj over here, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to address the disbelievers over here. Because the mushrikun, they used to practice Hajj. And they used to say that they were following Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses that. Then we come to ayah number 208. Very important ayah in the surah. And this is the difference between a Muslim and everybody else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dkhulu fi silmi kaffa. O believers, enter into Islam completely. في السلم كافة ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. And don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. So if you want to enter into something completely, if one foot is inside of the musalla, one foot is out, are you going to say that they're in the masjid? No. You have to be all the way in, completely inside, so that you follow everything in this deen. You have to be all in. Not that, okay, I'll follow the ibadat, but when it comes to the way I want to do my dawats and my shadi, I'm going to do it that way. No. Every single thing you have to enter Islam. And the opposite of that, anything less than full entrance into Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes by calling it khutuwat al-shaytan, the footsteps of shaitan. Allah says, enter into Islam completely. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. And do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Now over here too, Allah could have said, don't follow shaitan. But He says the footsteps of shaitan, meaning there's many different paths that shaitan takes. Come back to the beginning of Surah Fatiha. اِهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. We want to be on that one path, that straight path. If you take a step this way or that way, eventually you're going to end up all the way here, all the way there. You're not going to be on this straight path anymore. And shaitan doesn't care which path you take. He says, as long as you're not on Sirat al-Mustaqim, I don't care. Go to wherever you want. Because the destination of all of these paths is Jahannam. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look, if you don't want to follow the footsteps of Shaytan, look at the Bani Israel. They did. Sal Bani Israel kam ataynahum min ayatin bayyina. Ask the Bani Israel, how many clear signs did we give them? About that this is the truth. وَمَن يُبَدِّلْ نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. But the one who transforms and changes the blessing of Allah, because they were favored. They were the favored ones of Allah, the blessed ones of Allah. أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. That's what we asked for. So Allah says, أَنْعَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ. I blessed you. But what did they do? They changed this ni'mah. They changed the ni'mah of Allah مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُ. After it's given to them, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Allah is severe in punishment. What happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this deen, which was a blessing. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded them to do certain things. It's a blessing. It's for our good. Our teacher, Shaykh al-Hadith, Qari Muhammad Ilyas, rahimahullah, he said Hafizahullah, he said the only way to get happiness in this world is to follow the Sharia completely. And really that's true. Look at the problems that are going in our society. What is this? The economic inequality, right? Over there, if people were to follow the laws of Islam, or there's all this talk about the dollar collapsing, this happening, that happening. I don't know if that's hyperbole that people are saying the dollar will collapse. But then then there's other talk. There's financial meltdowns and this and that. What is this all based on? If we were to follow the Islamic teachings of finance, we wouldn't be in these problems, right? Then we have like this whole Me Too movement that's going on, that has been going on, I guess. If people were to follow the laws of Islamic gender segregation, our relations with one another, then there would be no issues. None of these issues would have occurred. And there's so many examples that we could look to. If a person follows the deen completely, rather than viewing it as a burden, don't change it to a burden. Look at it as Allah has blessed me by giving me a recipe and a roadmap to live my life properly, then it will be great. But if a person treats it as a burden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that my punishment is very strict. So now you're going to ask, why did they do this? زُيِّنَ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. Why? Because the worldly life was made beloved to them. وَيَسْخَرُونَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. They love this worldly life, so they didn't want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now what do they do? Not only did they believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and disbelieve in Allah and view the deen as a burden because they felt it was affecting their dunya, those who tried to follow the deen, they would mock them. وَيَسْخَرُونَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. But Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Those who fear Allah, those who are the muttaqeen, the ones who are entitled to hidayah, mentioned at the beginning of Surah Baqarah, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. They'll be above them on the day of judgment. وَاللَّهُ يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. People say, look, you're ruining your dunya by trying to follow deen. You're fasting, your productivity is going to go down, this, that, whatever. وَاللَّهُ يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Allah provides to whomever He wills without accounting. It's not you that's providing. Allah will provide. If you obey Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. He guides who He wants to صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. That was our dua in Surah Baqarah. Now the rest of the surah, it's going to discuss two things. We have time, right? It's Saturday night, right? So the rest of the surah is going to discuss two different things. And what are those things? Number one, it's going to show how a Muslim reacts now to being blessed with Islam. Number two, the surah is going to say, why do certain people, why do they go away? After recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the love of the world, yeah, that's there, but there's subcategories under that. All of that is going to be discussed. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, number one, okay, you have iman, buckle up, it's going to be tough. أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. You think you're going to get a free pass to Jannah and just say that I believe, I get to go to Jannah? No. He says, do you think that you'll enter Jannah without going through the things that the people before you went through? مَسَّتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالضَّرَّاءُ. Difficulties, hardships, it afflicted them. وَزُلْزِلُوا. They were shook. Tell the messenger and those who believe that were with them, they said, Mata Nasrullah. When will the help of Allah come? Imagine, the messenger of Allah knows that Allah's help is coming, but things are so difficult, they're going to ask, when is it going to come? We know it's coming, but when is it going to come? Allah says at this point, Ala inna nasrullahi qareeb. So now the difficulties are going to come. So how do you make yourself strong against these difficulties? Number one, make your family strong. How do you make your family strong? One way is spending. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. The people ask Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, okay, we're going through these difficulties, we have some resources, how do we defend ourselves? How do we spend? قُلْ مَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ. Whatever you spend of khayr, khayr referring to money here. فَلِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. For your parents and your close relatives, and for orphans and miskin, وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. So first and foremost is our family. So look, the blessing of being a Muslim is that everything you do, as long as you do it in line with this deen, you're rewarded. Muslims, they spend on their family. Non-Muslims, they spend on their family. But when a Muslim spends on their family knowing that this is what Allah has commanded me, it's sadaqah. So when you do that, have that intention. It's sadaqah as well. You can't give zakat to your children or your spouse or your parents, right? But when you spend on them, it's sadaqah. And you are allowed to give zakat to brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, just so you know. Okay? Now, وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Okay, but it's not all about spending. There's other difficulties. This family of yours that you're spending on, you're going to need to defend them at some times as well. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ. Fighting has been prescribed on you. وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Though you may dislike it. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And it could be that you dislike a thing, but it's better for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. And it could be that you love a thing, but that thing is bad for you. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah knows and you don't know. Okay, fine, we're going to fight. But do we do it unrestricted, all-out warfare, or do we follow Allah in that? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الشَّهْرِ الْحَرَامِ قِتَالٍ فِيهِ. They ask Allah about when can we fight. Oh, there's sacred months, we can't fight in them? Okay, Ya Allah, we won't fight at that time. Then you've come back, you're victorious. Allah has given victory. So you want to enjoy yourself. Do you enjoy yourself in any way? No. يَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They ask Allah about, they ask Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam about alcohol and gambling. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, فِيهِمَا إِسْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. In alcohol and gambling, there's great sin and there's some benefit for people. Remember this when you want to weigh anything in your life. When there's a thing that you feel has a harm on your life, but there's many benefits, look if the benefit is greater or the harm is greater. I'm not talking about halal and haram things. I'm talking about like mubah things. Like my brother, I'll give his example. His smartphone, what he did is he just turned it in and got a flip phone. He said for me, meaning for him, he's like the harm of having a smartphone is more than the benefits that he gets for it, right? And so different things in your life, when you want to analyze if it's good or bad, look what is more, the harm or the benefit. So Allah said there might be some benefit in gambling and alcohol, some, but the harm outweighs it. Then again, وَيَسَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. What should we spend? Now, after that, we find, Ya Allah, we can't spend on these things, certain things, right? But then we just fought a war. That's what the ayah talked about before. Now there's orphans. So وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى. They ask you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, about orphans. How do we take care of them? Are there rules? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays out the rules. Okay, fine, we've talked about orphans. We're taking care of other people's kids. What about our own children? Well, if you need to have children, you need to get married. You know, I don't know if anybody knows in Hardowi in India, there was one scholar named Shah Abraham al-Haq. He used to come to Hyderabad a lot as well. So one time, a person came to him, to Shah Abraham al-Haq, and he said that, Sheikh, please make dua, I have children. Please make dua for me to have children. He said, so Sheikh said, okay, I'll make dua. Then he came back, 6-7 months later, Sheikh, please make dua that Allah gives me children. I really want children. Sheikh made a lot of dua for him. He came back 2 years later, Sheikh, please make dua, I have children. He's like, no, there's something going on here. He's like, are you married? He said, no, I'm not married. Right? He said, yeah, get married first, then you'll have children. So over here, before you have children, you have to get married. Can you marry whoever you want? No. Allah says you can't marry mushrikat, right? You can't marry mushrikat and ahlul kitab, there's some restriction there. Then fine, you're married. Can you do whatever you want in marriage? Or everything in intimacy, is it okay? No. وَيَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. There's certain times where you can't have intimacy. Fine, they're off of those times. Can you do whatever you want? No, there's still some restriction there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays that out. Now certain things happen, there's a marriage, you're married now. But not every marriage works out, unfortunately. Sometimes there's divorce. But Islam's submission to Allah is that when we get together, we do it with submission to Allah. And when the marriage breaks apart, even then you do it with submission to Allah. So that even at the time of disunity, there's some unity, at least against non-Muslims. So then the laws of divorce are laid out. And when a divorce happens, does that mean that your life is over? You should never get married. No, you should get married again. So the laws of getting married again are there as well. But along with that, there's children. So parents have to work together and maintain some dignity with one another, that even though they're divorced, how do you raise your children? So those ayahs are mentioned as well about the rearing of children. All of these things, they come, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows that to follow all of this will give you strength, and it will give you unity to face the forces that are against Islam. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a practical example of Alam tara ila alladhina kharaju, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the people of Dawood alayhi salam. The people of Dawood alayhi salam, the people of the Bani Israel, they asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, give us a king so that we can unite. Now look, everybody says, we want Islam to change. We want Islam to ascend again. But are people ready to do the work or not? That's the question. So now these people, they asked the Prophet at the time, oh Allah, ask Allah to send a Prophet so that we can fight and we can get our lands back. The Prophet said, look, if you're told to fight, are you going to? He said, of course. فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِتَالُ تَوَلَّوْا إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِّنْهُمْ. But when fighting was prescribed on them, most of them turned away. Just a few remained. So it shows you might be about the talk, but are you about the walk? So now you have this whole group of people, many of them, they turned away. Now Allah, He appoints the king. Who's the king? It's Talut over here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Talut is going to be the king. Now Talut, he had some qualities. Talut, he wasn't rich. But Talut, he was bastatan fil ilmi wal jism. He was blessed in his strength and in his knowledge. These are qualifications for a leader. Not what family they're from, not what country they're from, not what their background is from. Their intelligence, their strength, their leadership qualities. But this is a test that will happen as well. Are you willing to put yourself under people you may not like, or people who you feel that, you may be more qualified than them, or why my family is better than. This is a test that comes up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions this turns some people off as well. Now after that, so you had a lot of people, you had a little less, now you have a little less. Now Talut, he decides to test them and see who's with me. So you only have a few, and he said, let's go out for battle. When they go out for battle, he said, nobody can eat or drink. Now they come to a stream. It's a very hot day. He says, who wants to drink? Nobody's allowed to drink. فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Most of them drink, however. Most of them drank, so now Talut, he had only a few people left with him. But these few people who had this quality of sabr, again, what happens? They fight Talut and they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. رَبَّنَا they first they say, كَمْ مِنْ فِئَةٍ قَلِيلًا. How many small groups have overpowered large group? بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, by Allah's help. وَاللَّهُ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. وَلَمَّا بَرَزُوا لِجَالُوتَ وَجُنُودِهِ قَالُوا رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا. They make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, pour patience upon us and make our feet firm. وَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ, and help us against the disbelievers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave them victory. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory. How does He give victory? Allah describes Himself in the next page. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Because Allah is the one whom there is no God besides Him. Al-hayy al-qayyum, the ever-living, the one who holds everybody else. لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. He never gets tired. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. He gives victory because everything that belongs in this world is His. So He's the one that will give victory to you. And nobody can ask for help in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in front, what's behind. Me or you, we're always afraid. Who's coming for us? Who's going to take away our... I have a friend, a student of mine. He leads in a big masjid here. He leads Taraweeh. So you know what he said? He's like, he has finals coming up. He's like, in the past, I used to take days off. And I used to tell the other imam to lead. He said, now there's too many huffaz. If I take a day off, I might never get my spot back, right? So everybody's always looking over their shoulder. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't have to look over His shoulder, right? وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His kursi, the footstool that's in front of the arsh, it encompasses the heavens and the earth. Imam Qurtubi says that the kursi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in relation to this world, the world in relation to the kursi is like taking a ring and putting it in the field. That ring is the whole universe, and the kursi is like that huge field. And then that kursi in relation to the arsh, the throne of Allah, kursi meaning footstool, is the same difference, meaning a ring to a field. Now, why would people disobey this majestic Allah? Because it's getting late, we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll finish up the summary of Surah Baqarah tomorrow and speak about Surah Al Imran as well. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.
Because it has a lot of tolerance,